Kevin Rudd, the Brisbane Airport Corporation say that flight numbers will more than double to over 35 million by about 2023. Isn't it inevitable that we need a second runway?
I've never argued that Brisbane Airport should not be expanded. I've always argued that the debate lay in where and how it should be expanded. And what the BAC have done from day one is just plumb for one option, that is, the western parallel runway, despite the fact that that is the option which delivers the worst impact to the surrounding communities. And I represent one of those communities.
Well, what are the other options?
Well, the ones that we've always argued that they should properly test are an eastern parallel runway, an enhanced cross runway or an east-west runway, or furthermore, a parallel cross runway further out into the bay. What they've never done, and never had the guts to do, to be quite honest, is provide a cost-impact analysis of what would be the financial cost of each of those construction proposals, what would be the aviation impact in terms of how the airport would operate, but on top of that, what would be the relative impact for noise for the surrounding communities. They've never done that, so we don't have a comparative basis for looking at which, in fact, of these four possible options would be best for the future overall.
So it'd be quite possible to have a Sydney-style or Hong Kong-style runway right into the sea, right into Moreton Bay.
We argued right from the beginning that that's what they should have tested against the other options. And I never said at that stage that one option was necessarily better than the other. What I did say is we didn't have any data to make any such judgment. And anyone credibly looking at such a big development as this, which has huge economic implications for the city, for the state, but huge social implications for the people that I'm paid to represent, that we needed that data to make an intelligent decision. They never produced that data. Neither did the federal government, through the various transport ministers of the Howard government, and as a result they've gone for this option. They've now got it legally approved. That's been reinforced in the courts, and therefore the position I now find myself in is one of not opposing the construction of this runway now because I've lost that action in the courts, but instead to seek to minimise its impact now as far as noise for Brisbane's south side is concerned.
Now, the Brisbane Airport Corporation argued two things. Firstly, that there's a 5-kilometre buffer zone between the end of the runway and any residential houses, so therefore planes would be well into the air or still in the air over residences, and the noises would be minimal. They also argue that aircraft are getting progressively quieter. Do you accept those arguments or not?
Not at face value, no. And part of the reason for it is I've learnt over a long period of time not to accept anything at face value that the BAC has had to say. For example, a long time ago they said we should all be happy with this western parallel runway because it will enable the corporation to run what's called simultaneous operations over the bay. That is, that aircraft would come in over the water on one runway and depart over the water on the other runway, that is, the parallel runway. Well, if that was the case, we'd all pop our champagne corks and go home. The truth is, and they knew it was the truth at the time, is that weather conditions and wind conditions don't permit that. And for a large slice of the time, you will therefore have operations over the suburbs as well. It's for these reasons that I'm quite distrustful of these sort of bald statements that the BAC have to make, because I think they're driven more by public relations concerns than the actual truth of the impact of what happens on the ground if you're on your back veranda at Bulimba, Hawthorne, Cannon Hill, Morningside, Coorparoo, or the other tens of thousands of households who will potentially be affected by this.
Now, you're concerned about some procedural issues at the moment, one of which is that the Air Services Australia and the Brisbane Airport Corporation publish the new flight paths so that people can at least see what they have to argue about. And secondly, that there's sufficient community consultation. Are you worried that this is going to be a rushed process?
I am concerned about how deep this consultation will be. If the BAC, for example, the Airport Corporation, is saying, look Kevin, don't worry, it's all going to be fine, 5-kilometre buffer zone, there'll be no impact over your suburbs. Well, my response to that is, okay guys, show us the draft flight paths. Where are they going to go? If you think it's going to be innocuous in its impact, let all the people that I represent know precisely where these planes are going to go. Then they you see the blood visibly drain from their face when you put that proposal to them. I will be very interested to see what draft flight path information they actually put out to the community. I've told them that I expect it to be real, to be concrete, to show where the planes are going to go so that people in the community can react in a knowledgeable way, not just some glossy brochure which says, planes will take off towards the south.
There has been, there is a view amongst some in the community that if you translate the existing flight paths 2 kilometres westward, which is where the other runway would be, that there would be planes coming in over suburbs such as Hamilton and Ascot and so on. Do you think there's credence in that view?
Well, at this stage we just don't know how they're going to operate it. Which of these 2 new runways is going to be in benign weather conditions used for takeoffs and which will be used for landings, which will be used for operations towards Sydney and Melbourne, which will be used for operations towards ports in North Queensland and further north in East Asia. All this is up in the air at the moment. So frankly, flight paths at this stage could well go anywhere. That's why all people in the community, north of the river, south of the river, should have available to them this basic information so that they are in a position to provide an intelligent response to the government about what the impact will be for them and their schools and their community organisations and their churches.
And finally, the BAC says the 5 kilometre buffer zone between the edge of the runway and the residences should be enough to address concerns of overhead aircraft noise. Is that credible?
I don't believe it is credible, and that's why I remain active in this fight. I've lost the fight to stop the parallel runway. That was defeated in the courts. I spent years fighting it in the courts. My job now is to minimise the impact of this thing on the residents who I'm paid to represent. But when they say 5 kilometres should be fine and dandy, they're about to bring in these things called VLAs, very large aircraft. The BAC tell you that they're going to be quieter. Well, I remain to be convinced that how an aircraft with double the carrying capacity of a 747 is going to be quieter than a 737. I mean, pardon me for being sceptical. I grew up in the country, I went to a state school, and maybe I just haven't learned to read and write yet, but I am a little sceptical about those bald-faced propositions. And the other thing is, the sheer volume of aircraft movements are such that however they use this runway in the future, an increasing physical number of flights will be made over the suburbs, both south and north of the river. My job is to act as the community's representative, and I intend to do that to the bitter end.
Mr. Rudd, thank you very much.
Good to be with you.